we are going to talk a little bit about um, how we at Security Scorecard kind of look at third-party compliance and helping users kind of get the insights that they need. Just kind of a little setup about who we are and what we do at Security Scorecard. Basically, our platform scans the entire IPv4 internet for potential security issues, parses publicly available breach data, and things like that, and then attributes those findings to the companies that own the assets that might have the issues or might be named in the breaches, those sorts of things. And we basically use that data to build out an overall security score for the company. That's the name, Security Scorecard. And while doing that, when it comes to compliance specifically, we map all of that information that we find, potential misconfigurations or vulnerabilities that could be related to compliance controls, and we map those issues to those controls. And this just kind of gives a quick lens from the attack surface level into how well or poorly an organization might be doing in terms of following those controls. So that's kind of a little bit of the what we do. The how this can help is in situations where you're, say, assessing another company. You're interested in using or sharing data through a third party, and say you're SOC 2 compliant, or it's just important to know where they stand from a security standpoint for your own internal policies, especially in situations where your customer data is going to be stored or moving through their systems. They kind of become a link in your own security chain, right? You hear about breaches that happen because of third parties pretty frequently. So with some compliance frameworks like SOC 2, the security of your third parties actually reflects on you during an audit. So it's important to know as much as you can about who you're dealing with. And people often use things like questionnaires or RFPs to have a company assert their security status and policies to you before you kind of get involved. But before getting into that sort of back and forth conversation of, prove that you do these things, provide the evidence and all of that, it's helpful to just kind of have an at-a-glance view of a company's external attack surface and see if there are any issues that jump out that might indicate potential problems with their adherence to that compliance, or just kind of let you know how secure they are before you start doing business with them. So by having all of that scan data, having it associated with those controls, kind of gives you the opportunity to, before you get into the emails and spreadsheets of tracking it all, have a quick at-a-glance view of, this company has a pretty high grade in general, and they don't have a lot of issues related to the compliance frameworks that we're concerned with. That's sort of one way we help. The other side of the coin is when you are the one being assessed, or if you're assessing yourself. So you're kind of monitoring your own organization. If people are asking you for this information, you kind of need to be ready to provide them with documentation and evidence of your policies and adherence. So in between audits, there can be drift in configurations or how tightly people are following the policies that have been written. So using a tool to watch for issues that might be occurring at the attack surface level of your environment that could indicate a problems, it allows you to act proactively rather than discovering an issue during an audit. No one likes to have findings mid-audit, obviously. There's also ways to go a little deeper into that, which I'll show you, like getting an inside-out view. I talked about how we kind of scan everything from the outside, but if you're concerned with monitoring yourself, we have the ability for you to connect up your cloud accounts, AWS, Azure, Google, or GitHub, and we can use a read-only view of those configurations of those cloud accounts to pull in that data, look at those configurations and where they are associated with controls and in different frameworks. we can show where there's, this is a configuration that would need to be changed to be in adherence with this, that sort of thing. That becomes a view of the organization that only you and your organization can see of your configurations. It doesn't affect your score, or it's not publicly visible, that sort of thing. But finally, the other thing that we're going to go over is kind of levels of customization. It's all well and good when you're trying to specifically do an authored framework like SOC 2, like CIS, like NIST. But sometimes people will say, yeah, we do SOC 2, but we also need to check for these, 5 or handful of things that our security team has specifically asked for over and above that framework. Or, yeah, we use, CIS, but we know that these particular issues aren't that important to us, and we'd like to kind of drop them from the list. Or in some larger organizations, they'll just build a policy with all the controls from the ground up, and have their own kind of homebrewed compliance framework, even though, if we're being honest, they're all sort of derived from each other at this point. So we wanted to give people the ability to do that. So the kind of summary of the problems being solved and the areas of focus are when you need to look at another company and get kind of an at-a-glance view of how they're doing in terms of general security and adherence to compliance controls, or yourself. Let me go ahead and take a look at the questions here before I jump in here to the demo. So does vendor risk management differ from third-party risk management? That's a great question. I don't think it does very much. The only distinction, I think, in the terms is, a vendor is someone, with like a paid relationship to provide a service to you. The third party is much more broad, and just any place that you're interacting with or is dependent on your infrastructure, or you're dependent on their infrastructure to move data around. So I think they're extremely similar there. And okay, this is another good question. What is the key benefit of continuous monitoring over point-in-time risk assessments? I think something to keep in mind there is, as I said, there's the audit time level of security that you have, and then there's the rest of the time. And in between audits, as much as everyone wants to keep it, right on the line of compliant, there can be drift in configurations. There can be more lax adherence to policies. So continuous monitoring is a way for you to sort of see where you're at as you go, and then you can fix things before you get into the actual audit time and when things would be critical. Let's see, we have just checking the chat. Okay, great. So let me go ahead and jump into a little demo here. I'm going to share my screen. This should be sharing now. So this is the compliance view within the Security Scorecard platform. Now, there is the overall view. As I said, we scan the internet for issues, and we have sort of a compliance framework of our own for these different factors that we're looking at, and they all add up to an overall score. So you can see like the actual 0 to 100 number score, and then the associated grade with it. And you can look at other companies and see where they stand in the same way, and what their different score factors are. But compliance specifically takes all of this data that's been aggregated and associates it with the controls of various compliance frameworks, such as ISO 27001, CIS, or SOC 2. And basically, there are 3 states that the information can have. One is we don't have any evidence that we can assert for you there. Like, we can't tell you whether or not Google has defined a mechanism for communicating during an incident response. There's no way for us to scan for that. But we still give you the information about the control. However, there's also the blue and the red, right? The blue is we scan for this type of information, and having scanned them for this type of information at this time, we didn't find any issues. We can't say for sure that they're 100% good across the board. We're looking at their attack surface, obviously, but we do scan for them and we don't have any findings. So that's kind of the positive side of the coin. The issues side of the coin is, okay, we do scan, and we were able to find some issues that seem to have an impact or relationship with this particular control that you're concerned with. To be fair about it, let me jump back to my own scorecard because I don't want to sort of point out anyone else here. So yeah, we're able to take the different controls, associate them with that data, show where it seems like things are going well. We can say the types of scans that we do have information related to this and there's nothing wrong, or where there might be an issue, like, hey, jump in and take a look because we found, a website that doesn't have a, CSP policy, things like that. The way that this is helpful at the beginning of an assessment with a company is to kind of give you the starting point for that conversation. If you're looking at them and you say, okay, they have a good grade, we care about SOC 2, they have, pretty good compliance here, but for our talking points, we might bring up some of the issues we found. Or if they give us a clean bill of health and say we're doing everything right, we might say, okay, that's good to know, but it looks like there's some things that were found on your attack surface that might be an issue. So let's dig into that a little more. Let me take a look at the questions that have come in. Let's see. How accurate is the scoring system? Yeah, that's a really good question. There is a way, let's see here. I'll provide a link to, there's a publicly available page that describes how we do our scanning, how we attribute that data back to the company that it's associated with, and sort of how that score is built. It has a lot to do with how many issues are found and what the industry average is there. And sometimes a very large organization can end up with a low score just from the sheer quantity of issues that can be found across a very wide attack surface. So that's why you can sometimes see that. And we see what is the best practice for third-party risk assessment? That's a broad question. I think that the best way to go about it is to have a firm understanding between the two organizations that are handling the assessment, yourself and the organization that you're assessing, of what the timeline is that you need, particular answers, evidence, assurances by, and make sure you have kind of that relationship defined so that there's no surprises along the way of well, we needed an answer by this time and we didn't get it, that sort of thing. I think the best thing that you can do up front is make sure you know who your contact is and that they are understanding and on board of what your timeline is for getting all of the answers that you need. Having a firm understanding of which particular questions need answering, what your most critical points or controls are, and having those answered up front will save you a lot of pain. And kind of back to a question that came up earlier, continuous monitoring is a way that you can keep an eye on it so that if something comes up that's a surprise along the way, you catch it as it happens and not at the point where an audit needs to occur and the finding would be the most detrimental. Let's pop over to the chat here. Okay, so we went over a little bit of how you can look at yourself or another company in relation to these frameworks. Wanted to talk a little bit about some of the other features. Since I'm looking at my own scorecard here, I have the ability to connect up these different cloud accounts. If I do that, the information, the configuration from that cloud account will be populated for me and my organization only, alongside the rest of the evidence in these lists, so that my view is expanded of how our company is doing against, SOC 2 or CIS. But again, no one else sees that, and it won't have any impact on the overall score here. The other thing that I wanted to show, so I obviously have some kind of customized ones here. I have CIS, but I have CIS with some tweaks. That's kind of the situation I was talking about, where someone says we use CIS, but we need to check these other few things. If you're using something derivative from an existing authored framework, you have the ability to go in and take SOC 2, for example, and then make a copy. And if you copy it, you can go into that copied version and start adding or removing controls from it. Let me go into the one that I've already edited here. So if you know that your company isn't particularly concerned if whether or not someone is using an active discovery tool, you don't want to see that come up, you can delete the control. If you have something in addition to the controls that you know that your organization cares about, you can add a control, you can name it whatever you want, and then you can choose which data on the Security Scorecard platform you'd like to relate to that. For example, you might want it to relate to a questionnaire that the company's answered, or that they have a SOC 2 report uploaded to the evidence locker, that sort of thing. And then there's also the ability to, if you're in one of those organizations that has said, we don't want to use one of the pre-prescribed ones, we have kind of our own, you can do something very similar and basically just create a policy from the ground up, adding your own controls. And in this case, I've just have one that checks to make sure specifically that the company doesn't have outdated browsers or operating systems, that looks at their network security score specifically. I showed a little earlier that we have the different score factors that are build up to make your overall score, but you can look just to make sure that a particular factor that you care most about is above a 90%, or checking to see that they have a particular type of evidence in the evidence locker. If you need to get a SOC 2 report from them and they have one available, you can go straight to it in the evidence locker, that sort of thing. So yeah, basically acts as your lens. If you're trying to use a pre-authored lens like SOC 2 or CIS, you can view yourself or those organizations through that lens. If you have a more specific one to your organization with a few tweaks, you can do that here. And then when you look at any company and their scorecard that you monitor, you can hop over to the compliance tab and view them through that lens. That's most important to you and your third-party risk management. Let's see, do we have any other questions here or anything that anyone would like to drill in on? All right.
Yeah,
If
I think
not,
question.
oh, sorry.
Chat. You can see in the chat, I think there is a question.
I have the chat and the QA up here.
Yeah, let me just so if I think Espandier, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing it correctly. It shows that until the vendor opts in to give accurate info through the platform, there will be no way to go beyond what OSINT can provide, and your platform is mostly a central place to gather your OSINT.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't looking in the right place in the chat there. Sorry about that. So, yeah, and if somebody has not joined the platform and added information, uploaded their SOC 2 report, gotten involved in remediating the issues, then it's definitely true that our view of that company is going to be dependent on the scans that we do and the breach information that we parse and then attribute to them. So yeah, in those situations where somebody is scanned by us, is coming up in the documents that we're parsing, we will attribute that information to them here. If they do, log in and claim their profile, they can do things like say, this isn't an issue for this reason, and we can work with them on that. But until that point, yeah, it is completely based on the data that we've been able to find. Okay, we have another question here. When you modify a framework like CIS, would it still show that you are compliant with that? So yeah, I definitely want to be kind of careful with saying whether or not we're showing that you are compliant. What we're showing is the attack surface view, and in any type of compliance, there's going to be a secure perimeter in which that audit matters. So if you're doing, SOC 2, your entire test and dev environment might not be involved in that audit unless you were, sharing data across that and production. And what we're looking at is basically the whole attack surface. So we're not saying this person is compliant. We're saying for what we can see, and we do scan for this particular type of issue, we're not finding any issues, or we are, and here's what they are. To find out if they're compliant, that's where you would need to, check the certifications that they have in the evidence locker, or reach out to your contacts there. And you may find there are situations where they say we're SOC 2 compliant. You look on here, you see some SOC 2 issues, and you ask them about it, and they might say, yep, that's totally true. Those assets are part of our test environment. For the parts of our environment that would be working with your data, here's the report we have, and so on. So just want to be clear about the difference between calling it compliant and kind of just surfacing the data as part of that third-party risk management conversation. Anything else that we would like to cover?
I think that we got all the questions.
All right, I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen here then. Thank you, everybody. Hope I was able to shed some good light on the topic for you.